Peter, listen, it's lovely to speak to you again. I remember we spoke a few years ago on a Zoom meeting, and I really enjoyed it. I've been following you for many, many years, hearing you on, all the indie sites that, I've come to know and stuff, and creating great division as we've gone through the years. But we'll get round to that. Like you said, I think you said yourself, you're kind of like Marmite, and I suppose in a way we all are, Marmite when we're on social media, or we all become sort of Marmite, as it were. But before we get to which probably because the election has just been called, and we'll discuss that. But at first, if you wouldn't mind, just maybe talk a little bit generally about the history of what's happened since the referendum in 2014. If you're okay to speak about that in general terms, because then we can talk, about Sturgeon, Sam, and Albert, and things like that, and maybe get to where we are now, and then get to the election in the second half. Is that okay with you, Peter?
Yeah, that's fine, Eddie. Yeah, I'm quite happy with that. Although it'll be quite a short conversation if we're talking about what's happened since 2014, because
Yes.
there's pretty much nothing, and that is precisely the problem. The way I think about it, the way I think it's helpful to think about it, it sounds about like, you said, well, what if? If we could imagine what could have happened, and just very quickly going through it as if as an alternative history sort of thing. What could have happened in 2015, the Yes movement had a huge amount of momentum behind it. You remember we were always all surprised at the way the referendum result it just shook everybody up, inspired everybody, and there was this massive surge of support for both the SNP and for independence after the referendum. Now, I want you to imagine that Nicola Sturgeon had decided to take that momentum and run with it, use it, build on it. She could have done that by a very simple thing. All she had to do was say, there is going to be another referendum, and that referendum will be held in September 2018. That's a provisional date we have for that referendum. And that way, she's got a grip of the momentum, and she's working towards a date, so she's keeping the momentum going. Then imagine 2016 and the EU referendum, and if we had really connected that to independence, rather than just fighting it as membership of the EU, as Nicola Sturgeon went on to do afterwards. She decided to fight against it after the result, which we could have used again to build momentum. But we would have had that momentum there. We could have used that result to build on that. But then Nicola Sturgeon decided not to use it for the purpose of Scotland's cause, but to start trying to overturn the referendum result, the EU referendum result. I just don't understand it. Even saying it now, I'm baffling myself. How could you imagine she could possibly overturn that decision? It just wasn't possible. Instead, she should have been campaigning to get us out of the EU, out of the UK, I'd say, before the UK left the EU, so that we could get some sort of continuity deal with the EU. It certainly would have made getting back in or staying in the EU a lot simpler. That's another issue. What we're talking about here is what Nicola Sturgeon did and did not do. She did not handle that correctly. And if we'd been in a referendum with a campaign having been running since 2015, and we'd had a referendum in September 2018, we would have won it. And we would have been looking at a very, very different situation now. But Nicola Sturgeon didn't do any of that, so we are where we are, which is not a good place at all.
Yeah, not a good place at all. I suppose just in response to that, I became disillusioned, probably sort of mirroring probably your own. You're very analytical of what was going on day to day and stuff. But I mean, I suppose after the 2016, was it 2015 when they put in their manifesto, and they specifically stated if we were taken out of the EU against our wishes, blah blah blah. So I mean, to me, that was kind of well, it was the last straw basically for me. After that, I think I gave up membership a year or two after that, and it's all really, really badly gone to pot.
I stuck it till 2020. I was really torn by this time because I started to have the really serious doubts in 2018, 2019.
Hmm.
And, I remember being at an SNP conference because I was a party member, a branch official, a conference delegate. And I was sitting there, and Nicola Sturgeon did her closing address, the big one, the big leader's speech. And at the end, it was the sort of obligatory standing ovation. And I just flatly refused to get to my feet. There were people around me giving dirty looks. One person actually turned round and was very blunt with me until I taught him what bluntness really is. There was, but that was, there were more and more of these incidents where I just thought, this is not right. This is it's all about the leader, and there is absolutely no substance there. And all the things that
it's a real theatre, yeah.
Aye, all the things that she's promising, none of it's coming to pass. But I stuck with it because there were people within the party. There still are people, Eddie, within the party. And we should remember this when we're condemning the SNP. We should remember that there are still people within the party that are trying to put things right.
Yeah.
We shouldn't throw that baby out with the bathwater.
That's a really good point, Peter, and I take that, and I'll be honest with you, I do feel like that more often than not, Pete. And so, actually, thank you for bringing that up. That's a very good point that I do have to try to remember. And I suppose that's why it is, for me, so frustrating, personally, because, I was so endeavored in this whole subject for, a decade, and it's only in the last year or so I've kind of, I don't want to, but I've kind of given up the hope. I mean, one of the things I wanted to do in an independent Scotland, I thought it'd be great to start that, the local democracy and get started and get involved with things and being able to actually make things happen and create a better Scotland and stuff. And of course, but now that independence to me it's been not bad. I don't even want to guess how many years. But, so now I'm just thinking, you just need to get on with the issues at hand and stuff and try and, get involved with stuff, but all under the UK. I mean, like, for instance, what's going on with the war and stuff. I feel terrible. Here we are complicit in bloody war crimes, and, Scotland can't do nothing against it, even though that, we disagree, we can't do nothing about it. It's hell frustrating.
There's kind of a suggestion in there, Eddie, that we have all the time in the world that we've made a mess of it this time, or a mess has been made of it. Although, I always say we all have to take responsibility. It is a democracy. And, the government and political parties will always either be what we make them or what we allow others to make them. So we are ultimately responsible as a sovereign people. Now I've forgotten what we were talking about. Yes, time.
Time. Yeah.
We don't have time. This idea that we can just wait and have another go at it. We don't have time because you recognise how much the ground has changed since 2014. And it seems to have changed the ground, that is, not the situation, but the background, the environment in which the campaign has to continue. That has changed dramatically. over the past 10 years, although the political parties' approach to the constitutional issue hasn't. They haven't kept up with that. They haven't learned anything from the 2014 campaign either. But it's going to change more. And the idea that we can simply do again what we did in the past, it's just not going to work, because the environment is not going to be suitable. Whatever happens in this coming election, we are going to have in London, ruling over Scotland, the most rabid British nationalist government any of us have experienced. And that government will have a mandate from the people of England. It will have a mandate to rein Scotland in, to put an end to this, a final solution for the Scottish problem. And so the idea that we can we simply try again in a couple of years, it doesn't work, because the opportunity is not going to be there. It's now or never. We're not going to get a chance again.
It always seems to me, Peter, well, it certainly did up until last year. Sorry to keep saying that. It's not that I don't care anymore. It's just so hard to keep optimistic.
I totally sympathise with that, though, Eddie. I totally sympathise with that. It's hard to get enthused when all you're getting from the politicians and this, what I call the old guard, the yes movement, all you're getting from them is the glittering generalities, where they're saying the words, they're saying all the right things, and doing none of the things that need to be done.
Like the old
absolutely no substance to it. So I can sympathise with people. I mean, I switch constantly. I swing between what's left of my enthusiasm and the vestiges of hope that I still have left. And I swing to utter despair. I really
I can see that through your blogs. I've seen that through the years through your blogs, Peter, and I think probably to me, and I'm sure many others, that's what's probably most attractive about it. It's just that day-to-day honesty of how you feel and how you see things. I mean, for instance, you was making me think there, once again, you've made me think yes, the whole point of independence to me, and it always has been, certainly since 2014 to me, imminent, and it seems to get more and more urgent all the time. I totally agree with what you're saying. But what we're doing through the political system, whether it's the Scottish election, the UK election, or everybody getting together and signing petitions and stuff, and it's not like I'm saying, this doesn't have worth, because it does. I get involved in that still myself. It's just that, where do we go? Where is the next level? How can we change things that we can start tipping things towards our favour? It's really hard for me to try to figure out what's needed.
When you talk about all these things, there's a plethora of projects out there, petitions and one thing and another, a plethora of projects, probably far too many. There is no focused campaign anymore. But what you have to ask yourself of these projects is, what next? And so likewise, when the political parties are telling you that this is their plan for independence, and you listen to what they say or look at it written down. I prefer to look at it written down so that I can pick it apart better. And you look at that and you keep asking questions, what next? Like Alapa, for instance, their plan is to get a majority of pro-independence seats in the coming election, or any election. But let's focus on the election in July, and then open negotiations with the British government. What next? What next? Why are they opening negotiations? How are they going to open negotiations? Why would the British government have anything to do with it? It just makes no sense. And on the one hand, they're saying that returning a majority of pro-independence MPs is a vote for independence, right? That is the will of the sovereign people of Scotland. And then the next breath, they're saying, but we have to go and negotiate that with Westminster. If the people of Scotland are sovereign, our word is final. And if that election is a true expression of the will of the people, then nobody can gainsay that. Sure,
Well, yeah,
there has to be negotiations for the independence settlement. But if you read what the parties are writing, they're not talking about the post-independence settlement negotiations. They're talking about negotiating independence. There is no negotiation for independence. The moment we say we want independence, that is it. It's happening. That's not me talking. That's the UN. That's the UN's view of it. The moment the people say they want independence, that is it. It's over. Then the lawyers and the civil servants step in and clean up the mess, and that can take years. I think it. I think it took something like 40 years until they finalised them. Maybe 50 years until Ireland. They finished the negotiations just a few years back there.
That's true.
And finalised some bits and pieces. These things can go on for decades. But the independence is not negotiable because our sovereignty is not negotiable. So the will of the people can't be negotiable. So how can you be negotiating independence when it's already been decided?
Well,
what are you supposed to negotiate? Negotiate maybe that it won't be independence, that it won't be quite what the people have voted. How can there be any negotiation about something that is already fixed and settled?
Yes.
Sorry, Eddie.
No. Please. I'm going to let you do all this possible because it's, to me, Peter, this is kind of getting to certainly one of the fundamentals, and it is like you're saying there because for many years, I still am under I believe that we're not going to get independence until, I start speaking to people and people that I know and people who are independent supporters and believe exactly like you just say. But it always seems to be ambivalent. It's always like, oh yeah, but we need these negotiations and we can't do this and we can't do that. And it's all about restrictions,
Yeah.
And I get it. I'm not saying there isn't problems. Of course there's problems. But I think what you're getting at here is like, well, we need to like say, we're going into negotiations to figure out what we're going to do after we're independent, not negotiations to see if we can get independence.
Yeah. If they were saying that, I wouldn't have any problem. But if you read what they're saying, they're talking about negotiating independence, which would be non-negotiable. However, I don't happen to believe that an election can stand as a proper constitutional referendum. I don't think it can stand as the exercise of a right of self-determination. I think it will be challengeable. And because of the urgency of the situation, when we do it, we want it done, and we want it to be unchallengeable. We want it to be cast iron, solid. So I figured out how to go about that, the approach which would give us that, and it's actually I've come to the conclusion I call it Scottish UDI. And I can explain why, but
yes, please.
I've said it's the only way that it can happen, and I've come to that conclusion reluctantly from being in a position where like a lot of people, I refuse to even talk about UDI.
I remember the days.
Then I think about
like
things.
You said, your views are not, immutable.
I think about things, and I ask myself, well, in the first place, why are we so bothered about UDI. Why? And it's because all these negative associations have been hung on it.
Yeah.
Particularly Rhodesia. But UDI itself has nothing to do with that episode. UDI is different every time. That's why I insist it's Scottish UDI, because it's a form of UDI tailored to Scotland's circumstances. It's nothing to do with Rhodesia in 1965. That's distant in every way imaginable and different in every way imaginable. I deliberately called it Scottish UDI because I realised that UDI had been quite intentionally hung with all these negative associations by the British propaganda machine. And I considered that, and I thought, well, that has been done for a purpose. They have worked very hard to make UDI unthinkable.
Yeah.
And I asked myself, now, why would they want us not to think about UDI? Why would they want us not thinking about that? Who benefits? How does it benefit them? And it occurred to me that the obvious reason they don't want us talking about UDI or thinking about UDI is because that is actually the way forward for Scotland's cause. That is the way that we should do it.
Yeah.
And
You either exercise your sovereignty or you don't. There's no, like you said, there's no arbitration in between. There's no,
all declarations of independence are unilateral. Who the hell else has the authority to declare a country independent other than the people of that country? So all independence declarations are unilateral. Like I say, but when you break it down, the term is neutral. It's banal. It doesn't really mean very much at all. But it has been made to mean all these negative things so that we don't think about it and we don't talk about it. And it's been made so that we don't think about it because the British state regards it as dangerous. And if they regard it as dangerous, then it sounds ideal to me.
Yes, no, I totally get your point, and I suppose that goes back a little bit to what you were mentioning earlier about the independence. The need for independence is always immediate, So and here we have now what's happening, like you would mention, a really quite extreme government, Scottish nationalists. I mean, I think we are on the verge of becoming identified to some degree as terrorists, and we get prosecuted for being such.
You see the kites being flown on that. I mean, Rishi Sunak's reference to Scottish nationalists as extremists, that was quite intentional. That's not just something that is slipped in there. And you will hear more and more of that. We've been hearing more and more of that kind of rhetoric.
Yeah.
And that is just kite flying to see how it goes, how it's accepted, how it's received by people, how the people pick up on it. And it will get more and more. The election campaign itself is almost certain to be a battle of the British nationalists. There is so little to differentiate between the two main contenders, the British Labour Party and the British Conservative Party. There's so little difference between them as far as ideology is concerned. Despite all Starmer's efforts to paint them as different, there is nothing. There's no difference between them at all, really. So they're going to end up fighting the campaign very largely on their to be perceived as the champions of the Union, the champions of the British state, of Great Britain.
Yeah.
And you know how it goes with their
Yeah,
campaigning. You know, each one tries to top the other. So if one comes out and says Scottish nationalists are extremists, somebody else is going to come out and say, well, really, they're terrorists. And then,
Yes,
well,
exactly.
really, they're traitors to the country. Really, they should be locked up in the Tower or whatever. And they'll keep trying to top one another until you have somebody coming up with a serious suggestion that nationalist parties should be banned. And remember, there is absolutely nothing to stop the next UK government altering the constitution.
Yes, exactly.
They can do anything they like with the constitution.
Yes.
And the people, I've always chastised people for comparing Scotland with Catalonia, because there is no comparison. The constitutional situations are entirely different. The campaigns, the movements may be similar, but the constitutional circumstances are entirely different. But, by the time we're 2 or 3 years into this next UK government, the comparison with Catalonia might be perfectly valid, because there's every possibility that the UK
have totally
changed the constitution to make it like the Spanish constitution, where it is a unitary state. What is it? Indivisible and indissoluble.
Oh God, yeah. Plausible, man.
And that would make independence campaigning virtually impossible. It would certainly make it as difficult as it is in Catalonia. And you see what happened there. So this is why I say we can't be complacent here. We have to act. And this is why it gets so frustrating when you see the Party of Independence, which is also the party of government, which means it is still crucial to Scotland's cause. And we see with this so laid back, relaxed attitude, as if they genuinely believe that the British state is going to play nice, that they can have this gentlemanly discussion and sort things out to everybody's satisfaction. It's not. This is an existential battle. At the end of it, either the British state is not going to exist as it's been known, or Scotland is not going to exist as it has been known.
That's a very good. That's a very, very true statement, Peter. It's frightening. I mean, it's strange then. So is this disconnect? Because that does remind me when I was speaking to John Finney last week about the Palestine situation. There's like that disconnect of what the politicians and the media, are said, and then, say for instance, the students will be out demonstrating. And it's the kind of same with us, with like Scottish nationalism, isn't it? It's like we look at the situation and like you just said there, why on earth would anybody trust the UK government? You'd have to not know anything about history or have experience of anything to believe that. So, there's that real disconnect. And to me, I suppose that's one way of describing of like people like myself and other people just moving away from this SNP facade of like, we're the party of independence. It's like, well, if you are, you certainly are not acting like it. If anything, you're a hindrance to independence.
Oh, they certainly are at the moment. Perhaps not the biggest hindrance. The biggest hindrance to the campaign, to the movement acting, the biggest hindrance to that is twofold. It's the SNP loyalists and the SNP haters. The SNP loyalists who insist that there's no problem and that their party is doing this brilliant job and so on. You've heard
the other. You're right there, Peter. Yeah.
And then on the other side, you've got the SNP haters who want to destroy the SNP, and they totally discount the fact that the SNP is the party of government. It will be for the next 2 years at least. And as I've said, the next 2 years are crucial because it's in the next 2 years that the British government is going to move against Scotland in a big way.
I know.
So
And
the next 2 years are crucial. So the Scottish government is crucial. So the SNP is crucial. That you have these two groups, the SNP loyalists and the SNP haters, and their two positions totally split the movement, totally divide it, and totally distract the movement from what needs done. There's the one thing that we say is absolutely essential is that the SNP must change its approach to the constitutional situation.
Yeah.
So here we have two groups, probably the two biggest groups that just about split the yes movement in half. Two groups, one saying that the SNP doesn't need to change, and the other one saying it is impossible for the SNP to change. So between the two, there has been absolutely no effort to get the SNP to change because one
So that division
is not necessary, and the other say it's not possible.
Well, maybe once again, maybe this is why there doesn't seem to be a great deal of impetus to me. I might be wrong there. Maybe you pick up a lot more than me. But like, what if I'm right? What you're describing there is like it's almost like it's being framed by both ends of the extreme, and the middle ground is kind of not as strong as it should be.
Yeah, that's a reasonable. What earlier on, I said one way of looking at the last 14 years was to do a little what if exercise to imagine how it could have been different. And if you'll allow me, I'll do another little what if exercise now.
Good.
In 2020, prior to the 2021 Holyrood election, and I and myself and one or two other people, particularly, I don't think you'll mind me mentioning his name, Jeff Bush, formerly of Alba. I believe he's been expelled from Alba because he's in favour of independence. We started a Facebook group, somewhat cheekily called. Sorry, I'm having a computer problem there. We started a Facebook group called somewhat cheekily SNP Members for Independence. And our whole purpose then, that was the start of the manifesto for independence. The original was something Jeff and I worked on together, although Jeff then went off at a tangent to work with other people on something which is not the manifesto for independence, although it has a similar name. But if we can imagine that we'd all got together, the whole Yes movement had got together, along with the members within the party that were unhappy with the present approach, what I call the Sturgeon Doctrine. And we put massive pressure on the SNP in the lead up to the Holyrood election. Political parties are never more malleable than in the run up to election. That's when you can really hold their feet to the fire. So if we made this demand that they adopt the manifesto for independence, a total commitment to specified actions, if we vote for them, if we give them that power, yet again, this is not a mandate that they can get out of. This is a contract with the people. If we had forced them to do that, it would have changed the situation completely. We would have then elected in 2020 a government that was committed to action on independence. Not the possibility of any more waffling.
Can I make one interjection there, Peter?
Yes, surely.
An example. How would you describe then, say, was it the 2015 manifesto when they said we won't be taken out of the EU against our will? I mean, to me, that I mean, maybe I'm a bit naive and maybe I was being a bit too optimistic, but to me, that was a contract. I mean, that's what got me their, well, aside from other things, but that's essentially what got me their vote and the belief in them. That, God, I'm glad they've sort of stated this, because there's kind of something, maybe not concrete, but certainly something you think. But
Yeah.
to me, they totally failed with that.
If one of the things that the political parties, excuse me, one of the things political parties, politicians in general, are very good at is giving themselves a get-out clause. There's always a get-out clause. I don't recall what it was in that particular instance.
Yeah.
There's always a get-out clause. The point about the manifesto for independence, I don't know if you've ever read it.
Yeah, well, I've read. Yeah, I certainly read what you've written about it anyway, and some others. Yeah.
The point about that is it actually spells out specific actions, a series of steps. It describes a process that leading up to the restoration of independence. Recall what I said earlier about I always asked what next.
Yeah.
So the political party says, right, well, we will do this. Aye, what's next? And if they can't answer that what's next question before they get into the point of independence, then it's not a plan for independence.
Yeah.
That's what the manifesto for independence answers the what next questions all the way through. The main question, and this is where my thinking about the issue took me eventually, is that it all comes down to the issue of legislative competence. And if any candidate in the coming election is talking about how they're going to restore independence, you ask them how they overcome the issue of legislative competence. One thing is certain. Our independence is not going to be restored other than by an act of the Scottish Parliament. It is the only body with sufficient democratic legitimacy to do that. People say that it's just the executive arm of Westminster, and that is true. But the people of Scotland are sovereign. Therefore, our Parliament is whatever we say it is. And if we decide that our Parliament should have legislative competence in the area of the Constitution, then so mote it be. There's no way around that. So that has to be the first step.
How does the SNP do that, Peter? Because, like I said, I've not been impressed with them through Sturgeon and the rest of it, and
it's not the SNP. It's not the SNP that does it. It's the Scottish Government that does it. Okay. But we have to assume that the SNP would be the party of government.
Oh, I see.
The government is separate from the party. So we just have to.
Well, I suppose what I'm saying is how. Once again, exactly what's next? How do we approach getting there, Peter? I mean, for instance, when you say we, I often do that myself, but then I catch myself on, and it's like, well, when I say we, it's meant to be us, the electorate and our representatives working together. But call me an old cynic, but I never seem to see that working. I see a request or a need from the electorate, and I see our politicians becoming, representatives for us and not following through with what they, promised to do.
There's much in what you say, of course, Eddie. But if we're talking about how it might be done, we have to imagine a political system in which the government is actually responsive to the people. Otherwise, we might as well just give up. Because
how do we approach?
Because then we're saying, well, no, there's just no way to get the government to do this, and I don't accept that there is no way. The Yes movement, the independence movement, made a choice not to force the SNP to adopt a manifesto for independence. They were all too busy doing other things, herding unicorns or whatever, and they simply wouldn't. They wouldn't even talk about it. Most of them, There was a lot of people came on board with it, but not nearly enough.
Enough, yeah.
You know, they were all too busy with their own things. Either that, or they all said, "Oh no, that'll never work. They'll never change the SNP. We need to get rid of them completely and replace them with something else." Aye, and then that doesn't work either. So then you need to get rid of them and replace them with something else. Alapa's not even been elected to government yet, and already it's changing. Already people are jumping that ship.
Yeah.
But the commitment, if the Scottish Government has made a commitment, if there's to be a de facto referendum in this coming election, it should not be about independence. Because if it's about independence, there's no answer to the what next question.
Yes.
There isn't any answer. Start negotiations. That isn't an answer, because that can only happen if the British government is prepared to cooperate. We can guarantee that they won't be prepared to cooperate. I mean, in no possible universe is the British government going to cooperate on that.
No.
So that is not an answer to the what next question.
Yes.
With the manifesto for independence in place, all the what next questions are answered, because as soon as that government is elected, and we're drawing scenarios here, so we have to assume that a party with a genuine manifesto for independence would get a substantial majority. You know, a majority government if it's a Holyrood election, and by far the largest number of MPs if it's a Westminster election. So if we make that a referendum on the Scottish Parliament asserting its legislative competence in the area of the Constitution, that then gives the Scottish Government a mandate to go to the Scottish Parliament and say, right, this Parliament has to assert its legislative competence in this. It has to take that legislative competence, because there's no other way it can take it. It's no other way that the Scottish Parliament can acquire the legislative competence that it must have for independence to happen. The only way the Scottish Parliament can get that is just by taking it and defying the British state.
Yes, exactly.
And the argument, my argument, is that by doing it this way, we make the claim that the Scottish Parliament has to have the legislative competence in the area of the Constitution in order that the people of Scotland may exercise the right of self-determination, which is guaranteed by the UN. It's guaranteed in international law. It is our right, and it is inalienable. And it cannot be exercised. That right cannot be exercised in any way. And that right also is identified as a human right.
Yeah.
So by approaching it in the way that I've described, we turn the constitutional issue into a human rights issue. And that transforms it massively in our favour.
Yeah.
Because we are arguing very obviously for an indisputable human right. And the British government would be arguing to deny that human right. So we would be in a very powerful position if we approached it this way. I can't even get any politicians to talk about this.
Yes, yeah. You took the words right out of my mouth, Peter. I mean, I personally totally think I agree with you 100% on what you're saying here. It is the only way to do it, but it's getting our political representatives to sign on the dotted line, isn't it?
Well,
I mean, but I agree what you said. Sorry, just about I like the idea of, like you saying, make it a human right issue. Maybe that is something that could help with the division that has grown between the movements. I mean, I'm sure we could probably all get on board that, because then it encompasses everything. Like you said, it really is a human rights issue.
Well, yes, but we haven't approached it in that way.
No, no.
And we should be approaching it in that way.
It's an
And we
interesting.
have to resign ourselves. The politicians have to resign themselves to the fact that there is no route to independence that doesn't pass through a point at which there is acrimonious confrontation with the
Yes.
British state. There
Yes.
is no way to avoid that. Also, there is no route to independence through the legal and constitutional framework
Of
that
the
has
UK.
developed over the centuries as a defensive mechanism for the Union.
Yes.
No way through there. What I am suggesting is that we take a route instead that steps outside the realm of what I shall call, just for the sake of discussion, British law,
Yes.
but stays within the bounds of international law. It's
Yes.
in that
Yes.
space
Yeah. Well, you make the
that
distinction.
we
Yes.
will move to independence. Again, I can persuade maybe it's me, but I just can't seem to get this idea. It's better than it was. I mean, people will actually use the term UDI now without crossing themselves or hanging garlic around the doors or whatever. You know, UDI, the term, and some discussion around it has come into the mainstream. I take a wee bit of the credit for that. But it's not happening enough. It's not getting in deeply enough, and it's not happening fast enough. And the reason it's not happening fast enough is because there's not enough people behind it. It's a numbers game, Eddie.
Yes, I totally get that, Peter.
It's when there are hundreds of thousands of people demanding a thing, and tens of thousands of them standing outside the Parliament shouting for end the Union. That's when the politicians start to listen. We are being managed by them all the time. Expectations are being managed. We're being manipulated. You want this? Well, here's what you're getting. It's close enough to what.
Yeah, and we're being closed in, like I think you mentioned before, Peter. Once again, why it's imminent, because we've got the mainstream against us, and our social media. They're slowly but surely changing laws on there, calling us on terror.
It is all closing in on us. It's a matter of urgency. This is why
you're right.
The people who are saying that we have to destroy the SNP, we have to get rid of them. The SNP is going to be the party of government for another 2 years, and probably for another 7 years, because as things stand, and we always have to make that stipulation, as things stand, they're going to win the next Holyrood election after. Come on, what's 20? I can't remember.
26, is it? Oh, I can't.
No, it's 26, 2031.
Oh, right, yeah, sorry, right, yeah.
We have to assume that they're going to learn, but it doesn't really matter, because it's the next 2 years that are crucial.
Yeah.
We're already late. It's like everything in the independence movement. Everything is between 2 and 10 years too late. We're playing catch up the whole time, except that for the last 10 years we haven't even been trying to catch up. We've been sitting in the same place. We've been sitting where we were in October 2014. We haven't moved. We haven't done anything.
No, I mean, I suppose, back in my young days with I was still very optimistic after the failure of the referendum to start building things back up. But, to cut a long story short, I quickly saw the SNP, not just in their own party, closing down democracy, doing it out with the independence movement as well, and trying to control everything. And this to me was like, oh God, this is the absolute worst thing, because we're all doing this because we all want to be part of a new, a new constitution and develop our own. And it just wasn't allowed. It was co-opted and corrupted, and it was so disappointing.
With hindsight, and this was the thought that came into my head at that SNP conference when there was the standing ovation, and I declined to get to my feet. I don't think I was the only one who. The thought that went through my head is, we've put too much trust in these people.
Yes,
and it's one of these thoughts that once it enters your head, you're like, you can't get rid of it, and it niggles away, and you keep seeing reasons to believe that you put too much trust in them, and it becomes one of these things that you say, it was so obvious. Why did I not see this?
So yeah.
During the Yes campaign, we saw enough examples and instances of SNP's almost pathological control freakery. They want to control everything. Which would be okay if they were good at it.
Yes.
And for a long time, they were good at winning elections. And because they were good at winning elections, we started handing over control of more and more. And then when Nicola Sturgeon took over, that's when it just went berserk. The control freakery,
absolutely,
became pathological.
Put Tony Blair to shame.
It really did. I mean, what was happening within the party is a disgrace.
Absolutely,
and now
shocking.
We see similar things happen in other parts. So, this is why I say to people,
everyone's got their stories.
You put your faith in the SNP. The SNP let us down. Which is a polite way of saying they betrayed Scotland's cause. And then you put your faith in another party, and the chances are they'll do the same.
Totally agree.
If Alapa was in government, they'd be in exactly the same position as the SNP, and it's the circumstances around the SNP that have made it what it is. And they haven't resisted those circumstances. The pressure has been on them all the time to conform and comply. Compliance, not defiance. When we want defiance, not compliance. So Alapa would have been in exactly the same position, and I have absolutely no reason to think that they wouldn't have buckled just as the SNP has. They're just politicians, and at the end of the day, they're self-serving and cowardly. They're not prepared to. They're not prepared to take chances. They're not prepared to cross a line. You notice that the British nationalists, personified in this instance by Rishi Sunak, they're not afraid to cross a line. They're not afraid to cross a line that created evil. They're not afraid to cross the line that calling Scottish nationalists extremists. They are prepared to cross these lines. Or not, there's all this gently. We've got to be polite. We've got to follow the rules. We've got to do it by the book. They don't get to write the book. The book is being written for them, and it's being written in pencil because it gets rubbed out and rewritten as they go along.
Exactly, you're right.
By the book, you're going to have to break the rules at some time. If you want to break the union, you have to break the union's rules. So, what's left down to us is how do we break the rules? We get the only advantage we have, and we only have it for the moment, is the advantage of choosing the ground on which we defy the British state, on which we go to fight them. We get to choose that ground at the moment. And I wondered, and I thought about it for a long time, what is that ground? What will the thing be? I thought it might have been Brexit. I thought it might have been that
Yeah, me too.
the SNP, Nicola Sturgeon, made sure that didn't happen. And so keeping on thinking about it, there must be this thing. We must choose the ground where we have an advantage, and that is that all fed into my thinking about legislative competence, etc., and then other stuff fed into it, stuff from like say Salvo and Liberation.Scot and Alf Baird and other sources, and then it occurred to me that human rights is the ground. If we make it about a right of self-determination and not independence, independence isn't a human right. It's just a constitutional status. It's not guaranteed by the
No, but I'm the Scottish law
for it. But if we make it about a right of self-determination, then it becomes a human rights issue. That is the ground. That's the ground that we want to fight them on. And you break them on that ground, and independence is something that we just walk on to. Because there's no way that they can stop us after that.
It's interesting then. So just briefly then, but we'll finish up, Peter, and then let you go for some lunch. You're probably starving. So is that the way? So for instance, like you say about turning this in, and I understand the process that you were saying that how to get there. So of how we get to bring the human right issue to the fore, because this is it. Under Scottish law, under international law, we have the rights to define our own sovereignty, and so. So yeah, oh God, I've done it again. What was I going to say there? Yeah, why has it taken so long then for us? Because this has always been an issue from the very start, isn't it? But it's like something that maybe is hopefully more people are starting to think of now. I mean, there's not to say we're doing too fast, but this ultimately, like I agree with you, it sounds probably like the most plausible road that we'd have to go down.
When I say things have changed since 2014, there's two sort of strands to that. One is just the political environment, the circumstances around it. You know what the British government has done, and what the SNP has done as the party of government, because it's party of government. I've got to keep saying that. But now I'm the one that's forgotten. Oh man. I really have forgotten what I was going to say.
Oh, that's well. It was about why is it? I remember what we was talking about. Why it's taking.
Oh yes, sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's
okay. I remembered what I was going to say. The things that have changed since 2014. Sorry. The other thing that's changed, apart from all that stuff about the environment, the other thing that has changed is what we have learned. Those of us that are open to the learning. The research done by people like Alf Baird and Sarah Sellers. So their research, Salvo, all of that stuff feeding in. It's what we've learned, plus the experience gained from the first referendum. You know, the SNP never did a review. The referendum. They never did. They just assumed that Nicola Sturgeon knew exactly why we hadn't won, and we just leave it to her and she'll fix it. That's totally wrong. There was never a proper review, and there's so much there to be learned. So there's that. We are more educated now. We know all these things. So people who are talking about the whole independence issue and the campaign, the people who are still talking about it as if we only had the knowledge that we had in 2012, 2013, they're getting it totally wrong, because they're cutting out 10 years of experience and learning. They're just ignoring all that stuff that's been feeding in. I don't think that's wise. We have to attend to what people are saying. It's the voices of dissent
Yeah.
The voices at the SNP and its control freakery has fought so hard to silence.
Yeah.
The voices of dissent are the very voices that we should be listening to. Because if the present way of doing things is not working, and it signally is not, then it's the voices of dissent who are the voices for change, for a new approach. And that is definitely what we need. Is it time for me to shut up, Eddie?
No, never be that. No, so I mean, in the last 10 years, say, last 12 years, say, well, no, it's in the last 10 years since the defeat of the referendum, you know, the movement in general is divided somewhat, hasn't it? You know, realistically, it's divided. It's got pretty fast. But at the same time, what you're saying is, and I totally, once again, I totally agree, is, you know, the UK state has got stronger. They've used these 10 years to, you know, try to their best to encircle us and surround us, as well. We've just got more and more divided. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, like you said, because we might go through these things and hopefully go down this human right issue. I don't know what it will take for everybody to get galvanized, or, you know, to get around that. But yes, surely that must be I mean, like you said, surely this must be a discussed way. Surely the SNP or whatever, everybody should be talking about this.
No, you would never get the discussion like that started in the SNP as it is now.
Now, yeah, of course. You
can't even get it started in Alapa. I know people who are trying to get this discussed in Alapa, but no. It really needs a big hammer to bash this idea into the heads, because, as I say, they're all cowards. They're self-serving cowards. And I'm not saying that just to be insulting. It's an observation derived from the way they behave.
Yeah.
They come out of it okay. Life in general, they come out of it okay. They're doing all right. They're comfortable enough. But they're afraid to actually do the things that need to be done. And that's why we don't make progress on things like universal basic income. You know, real change that would dramatically alter society for the better.
Yeah.
And we get no movement on these things because the politicians are cowards. And we need bold, courageous politicians, imaginative politicians. You know, the sort of politicians who created the National Health Service, for example, and the whole welfare state originally, not as it is now.
Yeah.
But the original concept of it, that was wonderful, and it was so dramatic. And these people had to be brave. They had to be bold to move on things like that. And we just do not have people of that caliber anymore.
No, we certainly don't. We certainly don't seem to have the system that helps it either. So, John, sorry, Peter, before we go then, maybe what's your thoughts then on the upcoming general election? How do you think it's going to, say, affect the Scottish constitutional issue? I mean, I know you have said about, you know, that they're going to bring in legislation, whoever it is, and they're going to make it much harder and stuff. But how do you think, say, the SNP is going to get on in the general election?
The SNP will lose seats, but probably still be the largest single party. British Labour in Scotland won't do nearly as well as they imagine they're going to do. The Tories will drop almost out of sight. But the end result will be the same, regardless of how we vote in Scotland. We have no influence in that election at all. Our votes mean absolutely nothing. We know what the outcome will be. The outcome will be a British nationalist government in London with total power over Scotland, thanks to the Union. that will be the outcome, regardless of the numbers, regardless of the parliamentary arithmetic. That's the outcome. And we've no way of preventing that. We've no way of using the election to progress Scotland's cause, the cause of independence.
If anything, it sounds like
because
it's going to be
there are no parties standing on a manifesto for independence. None of the parties has a manifesto for independence. And I will talk about the SNP specifically, since they are the party of government and likely to be, again, the largest group in Westminster. What the SNP is proposing, its plan, is actually an act of treachery. Requesting a Section 30 order is an act of treachery because it denies the sovereignty of the Scottish people. And that our First Minister, our government, denying the sovereignty of the Scottish people has to be an act of treachery. And that's, when I talk about having learned things since 2012, 2013, well, one of the things we've learned is that the Section 30 process is a trap. That it's a dead end, a cul-de-sac. It goes nowhere. It certainly cannot lead to independence. So anybody who's even talking about the Section 30 process really needs to just shut up, because it is not a route to independence. It's something we should actively avoid because it's a trap. Likewise, people should be aware of the likes of Ash Regan's proposal, because what she is talking about is transferred powers. Powers are transferred from Westminster to Holyrood. And I often say real power is not given, it's taken. What is given is not really real power. So the powers that will be transferred powers will never be more than a sort of rolling Section 30 order. It will still be the Section 30 process. And whether that's initiated by Westminster or by the Scottish Parliament, by Holyrood, makes no difference. It is still, for example, it will still be no more than a consultative referendum. It will not be a binding referendum. It will not be a determinative referendum. And a proper constitutional referendum cannot just be a consultative exercise. This is people voting on their constitution. This is not a consultation. This is seeking to know the will of the people. And once you know the will of the people, you damn well bet, right?
Yes. I couldn't agree more once again, Peter. And I'm so glad that you remember to bring up the Section 30 thing. Issue, because that's been a big question for such a long time. And I've always been of the belief of like how you describe it. Once again, you articulate it far better than I do, but that's kind of roughly how I understand it. And when I've spoken to other people, or other people have poo-pooed it, I've said, well, why are you asking for Section 30? Can you at least tell me why I've got it wrong? And I've not heard, or I certainly don't remember anybody giving me a good argument, or politicians saying, oh, this is why we should go ahead with another request. Have you heard? What is the excuse there? Have you heard any?
The reasoning is the Sturgeon doctrine, which holds that it must be legal and constitutional. But when she's talking about legal and constitutional, she's quite happy to flaunt the Scottish law and the Scottish Constitution. She's quite happy to breach those. She's talking her doctrine, which still applies. It's still Sturgeon's doctrine that John Swinney is following, is adhering to. The legal and constitutional, in their terms, refers to what the British state says is legal and constitutional. And if we give the British state the power to say what is legal and constitutional, our route to independence will always be illegal and unconstitutional, according to the British state. There is no there is no route to independence, no genuine route that the British government won't call UDI, hoping to pull down on us all those negative associations that I talked about earlier. They will call it UDI, which is why people say to me, "No, you shouldn't call it any kind of UDI, even Scottish UDI. Should avoid UDI." And I said, "No, because we're going to get that word thrown at that term thrown at us anyway. Better to take it now, take ownership of it, and put our own associations to it. Our positive associations to it.
Like civic nationalism.
Rather than leave it to them to use as a stick to beat us, we take hold of this stick.
Yes, I totally agree. Once again, brilliant stuff. Listen, Peter, I better let you get off. It's been wonderful talking to you. Would you be able to maybe, I don't know, come back after the election at some point, if that would be okay?
If I'm not locked up.
If you're not locked up, yes. and maybe we could discuss once more, because I'm sure, because although this situation does seem dire, it's not like there's not pragmatism out there, at least of ways forward. So, the idea with your manifesto of independence and stuff like this, would it be okay maybe if you would come back and maybe discuss that a bit more?
I have to say that just briefly, Eddie, the one thing that gave me hope was 2 years ago, when I was invited to talk to the Scottish Sovereignty Research Group, the conference in Dunfermline. And I stood up and I gave this talk about Manifesto for Independence, the Scottish UDI, saying pretty much the things I hadn't at that point added the human rights aspect of it. And that's what's kind of rounded it off and made it complete. But I presented that, and I expected a very, very hostile reaction. And I did not get a hostile reaction at all.
Well, that's good.
I didn't exactly get a standing ovation. People sat and listened a wee bit more than politely, and I even got some applause at some points. And I was totally taken aback at the reception that I got. And it was at that point that I thought, there is still hope.
Yeah.
And there's a good point to finish on.
Yes, that is brilliant. So, Peter, great. I so look forward to speaking to you again in the future and to catch up. That would be great.
I would be very happy to come back.
Brilliant. I'm so happy to hear that. And it's just such a pleasure talking to you, Peter. I'll let you get off, and I'll message you our thanks very soon. And thanks for all the informative stuff you bring along. It's brilliant.
Could you sorry, thank you, Eddie. Thank you, Eddie. I'll just say goodbye at this point.
Okay then. Yeah, listen, and stay in touch, or message me if anything. And like I said, we'll just leave it open when you're wanting to come back on. We'd love to catch up with you. And
have you stopped recording, Eddie?
No, it's still recording. I should stop recording. Well, all right, we can do that at the end. We can just
that'll get edited out.
We'll just cut it.
I thought I was giving you. I thought I put in some good edit points there, but that'll be for your editor. I was just going to say, when you get in touch, could you send me a link to where the
video is? Yes. I think we have
it on video.
Yeah.
Oh,
did you not know?
I meant to ask, actually.
I do apologise.
I've hardly been looking at the camera at all the way through, because I was thinking it was an audio recording. You'll have to convey my apologies to people that I wasn't looking in the camera.
Honestly, as far as I know, it seems to be more natural. Well, what we'll do is, if you want to, because my colleague's good at the editing and stuff, she's got the suite. So what I can do, if you like, Peter, I can just get her to do it and then send it to you, and I'm sure you'll be fine with it.
Oh, I don't have any editorial input. I don't want any editorial input. No.
No.
I just want to know where the finished thing is and when. Just so as I can share links to it.
Yeah, no worries. Well, what I'll do is, I might have to try and do it myself, because my poor old colleague has had an appendix problem, so she's been really quite ill lately. But anyway, we put it onto Spotify, Amazon Music, and YouTube. We've just started on because we did just do audio, but we've started doing some few video. I've been trying to get Marie said we need to do video, so we'll be on YouTube.
I think I've only encountered the audio ones, which is kind of why I thought this was audio, and
right, yeah.
just
No, I think
it's one convenient.
We did a couple of videos. We did one that I was at work for, but Marie interviewed Fergus Ewing and Ian McKinnon's about the national parks thing, and that was on the video, and that's a really good one because Ian McKinnon he's a fisherman and he's actually fishing and he's doing on his boat while he's talking with Fergus Ewing about national parks. It's very good.
Yes, I heard about that. I should have realised that was video. Anyway, lesson learned. In future, I'll check. Anyway, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Oh, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for your time, Peter. It is much, much appreciated.
Oh, you're very welcome. I would do this every day.
Oh, great. Well, listen, you know, and I'll catch up anytime, Peter. Anytime you like.
Right. Okay then, Eddie.
Brilliant. Thank you, Bill. Take care, man. All the best.
Cheers.
Thank you very much.